The goal of Cardano is to be around and useful. And so we don't tend to look at things in terms of weeks and months or even years, but we tend to look at things in terms of decades.
Today we interview founder of Cardano, Charles Hoskinson.
And in a decade since the project began, it's grown from nothing to millions of people.
As he gives his outlook for Cardano in 2024.
Now tell me, how do you compete with that if you're Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of these other guys?
We discuss what's next, what happens after this next major upgrade.
A hard fork will be initiated and the entire governance system will be turned on.
And watch today's whole interview. I cannot let you leave without asking you about Midnight, because I asked Charles the one question that every Cardano holder is wondering. Is it happening this year? Why do we need a sidechain if we have Hydra? And as a Cardano holder, will I get an airdropped token?
I love it. You guys cut right to the point.
By the way, both my brother and I, as well as Charles, are speaking at Rare Evo this year. Use code Altcoin Daily for 5% off your tickets. Link down below. And let's start. You've been in cryptocurrency for a long, long time. What's your why? Like even today, why are you still so passionate about crypto?
Well, cryptocurrency is part of a broader class of concepts known as exponential technologies. And they're super exciting because where and when they work, they can have a profound effect on the economic, political, and social systems of the world. So an exponential technology is where you have a small amount of input and you can get exponential output with it. And our first example of that as the human species was the invention of nuclear weapons. We create these things and just a little bit of uranium and you have this gigantic explosion, and you've added just a little bit more, it gets exponentially larger. We're like, wow, that's crazy. So suddenly we had this new capability, in that case, a capability to actually end the world. And because of it, it radically changed the entire world economy. We were used to this idea that every 20 or 30 years, the great powers would get together and go to war with each other. So we had World War I and World War II. Before that, you had Napoleon running across Europe and doing all these things. And then suddenly you have mutually assured destruction. So we were no longer able to go to war with each other to resolve our differences. Instead, we had to form the United Nations and have the Cold War and all these types of things. So one technology radically changed the entire output of the world as a whole. So now you look at 21st century, you have all these different exponential technologies. Blockchain is certainly one of them because a small group of people can build something, case of Satoshi, for example, that has radically changed finance. And a small group of people can change things that can actually rebuild the entire economic, political, and social systems of the world to the extent that you change every government, how voting works, how transparency works, what your expectations are about your powers as a citizen, your identity in the data economy, money, sound money, these types of things. All of these things can be reconstructed, and you don't need 1 million people. You don't need a war. You need 50, 100, 200, 300 people working on an open source project. Small group of people, exponential returns. So there's nothing I can do in my life that's more meaningful than work on that type of technology, because I actually have a shot to be on the ground floor, have a seat on the table that actually is going to define how humanity works in the 21st century. So that's kind of setting the stage. And then there's mounting frustrations. I'm deeply concerned with how fiat money works. We have $34 trillion in national debt, and it's only going to get worse from here. If you take a look at like 1988, when The Simpsons came on, Homer Simpson is an uneducated blue-collar worker who somehow is able to buy a house, have 3 kids, and 2 cars. And you look at today, you have husband and wife, 2 master's degrees. They can't afford a car. They got a cat. They take the bus. Okay, so what the hell happened? The money went bad. And it's only getting worse over time, not better. And that's just one example. You have half of our country, the United States, feeling that elections are unfair. Okay, well, how do you restore election integrity? Just say the other half is stupid, and as long as we're winning, it's okay. No, you have a new voting system. You have this whole ESG movement where they say we want to track all carbon in the entire world everywhere you go. Well, how do you do that without a mass invasion of privacy or destroying the competitive advantage of American companies? Well, you need a blockchain system for that. So blockchain can permeate and touch every single thing we do. And what it allows us to do is go from a don't be evil to a can't be evil world. And my number one issue, especially in an age of post-COVID, is that institutions, they've really lost faith and credibility. We don't trust them anymore. Your politics basically decide on which institutions you don't trust, but everybody universally agrees that institutions as a whole are losing credibility, whether that be the Treasury Department or the FBI or the DOJ or the CIA or what have you. A lot of people didn't like the war in Iraq. Well, not many people trust the intelligence community anymore. After Edward Snowden, how many people trust the NSA to be good users of your data? How many people trust the Justice Department at this point, especially with FISA courts and these types of things? We just don't. And we keep saying, well, we want change. We want change. We want change. And the reality is, you're not going to get change at the ballot box. And you're not going to get change by telling an uncaring bureaucracy that things need to be better. You get change by changing the system. Okay, we have to play a new game, and the new game is blockchain. It's one of those exponential technologies that we have. And in just 15 years, we've gone from the mad pipe dream of some unknown cypherpunk on the peer-to-peer foundation forums to a global movement with hundreds of millions of people and trillions of dollars of value. That shows you the power of exponential technology and how magical these things are. So that's what gets me passionate. And it's ever renewing. Like today, I just did debates for the Constitutional Committee of Cardano, and we have 21 candidates running for 3 seats, and some of them are aggregators. So there's actually more like 60 candidates, and they're from more than 20 countries, and that's a global movement that's happened just in Cardano, which is a microcosm of the macrocosm, which is the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. So it's really having a front row seat with destiny.
Charles, on Altcoin Daily, we talk to an audience of over 3 million on all our social outlets, and we get these questions all the time, especially from new subscribers. Like, what makes Cardano unique? How is it different than the other L1s? Obviously, I know Cardano versus Solana versus Ethereum, they're all dApp platforms, but what makes Cardano unique?
Well, the really thing that made Cardano special was an endless and relentless commitment to first principles thinking. So we took a step back in 2015 and we said, let's imagine as if Bitcoin wasn't invented. And instead, let's focus on the output. Like, how could you build a system that in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years actually has a shot of running governments, running Fortune 500 companies, being in the room always when transactions are happening, something as pervasive as the web browser. So when we said that clean room first principle thinking is necessary, first there was a commitment to bringing the brightest people in the world. So step one was engage with the universities. So we went created labs all across the world: Stanford, CMU, University of Washington, Wyoming, University of Edinburgh, Tokyo Tech, University of Athens, and wrote 210 papers covering the entire gamut, everything from law and policy, the programming language, to scalability protocols, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing was to ask, okay, where do these protocols need to go 5, 10, 25 years in order for them to be effective and efficient? And that really is in 3 categories. They need to be scalable. So as you gain users, you gain capabilities. BitTorrent's a great example of that, where as you gain users, you get your movie faster, not slower. So you can truly grow to a multi-billion person protocol. Second, they need to be interoperable because you have to talk to and work with millions of different things. And if it only works with your own thing, it's not really doing much for you. And third, you need good governance, because the problem is, if these are going to cover economic and political and social systems, the people using them have a right to have a say in the evolution and direction of them. Otherwise, you're going to hyper centralize around a small group of gatekeepers. And then what's the point of replacing the old systems? You're just killing one king and you're anointing a new king. And you're like, oh, this new king's a lot better. No, I'm American. I don't like kings. Let's try to move beyond that. We had a bit of a disagreement about kings in the 18th century, and I think we won that fight. So that scalability, interoperability, and governance, we like to term a third generation of cryptocurrencies, the second being smart contract and the first being Bitcoin. And what we did with first principles thinking is apply all those papers towards trying to come up with not only a collection of protocols, but also a path to do that in a maximally decentralized way. The goal of Cardano is to be around and useful. And so we don't tend to look at things in terms of weeks and months or even years, but we tend to look at things in terms of decades. And in a decade since the project began, it's grown from nothing to millions of people and a $15 billion market cap and the most advanced on-chain governance system in the industry. In addition, we have the best long-term scalability approach and the best long-term interoperability approach with partner chains. So it's taken a long time to get here, and there's been a very serpentine path and a lot of things. But when you look at Cardano, you can't point to any one particular thing other than the fact that there's a relentless commitment to first principles thinking that gets it where it needs to go. And because it's looking at the long arc, the advantage of that is as you widen the aperture, you can see at any given pairing of time progress. When you zoom in, you may miss it because of some event. EOS at one point was a little sexier. Tezos at one point was a little sexier. Uh, IOTA at one point was a little sexier. I guess now Solana is a little sexier in terms of price action and these other metrics. But durability comes from community, and durability comes from good governance. Durability comes from showing up every single day. And what makes Cardano special is there's a 10-year track record where that happened. And when you widen the aperture, not only can you see it, you can also start getting an appreciation for how damn invulnerable the system is. 2,400 plus days of being up and never failing, being up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the fact that the brain is decentralized because the academic institutions write papers and they provide the innovation, the governance is decentralized, and we have the most decentralized consensus protocol, which means the tons of independent operators all around the world. It gives you a sense that this thing is built like a tank. It's not going anywhere, and it's going to be relevant. And then the rest of the things eventually get commoditized. All these people like advertising TPS and all that other stuff. It's the smart cow effect. As new protocols get developed, people, no matter how innovative they are, they get copied pretty quickly. There's no greater example of that than in the AI industry, where, we all were in awe of ChatGPT and we said, wow, that's so incredible. Look, this thing is like a supercomputer. This is a super intelligence. And now you got Claude and Perplexity and Llama and all this other stuff. Is, ChatGPT really that amazing and magical? And does it have that same awe? No, because people basically copied and commoditized and figured it out. So that's no longer the differentiator that matters. And when you look at things like performance, for example, that's not. So if people are telling you that that's the thing, that's where the puck is at, but it's not where it's going. You have to have a much more holistic view, and you have to have a very community-oriented view. And that's, I think, what makes Cardano different and special is that we've always had that view. And no matter where you go or what you do, you can keep that mindset.
Let me ask you something that I feel like is on everybody's mind in crypto, and that's that, the first time ever, crypto is an election issue. So you live in the US, Cardano operates around the world, but the US is a big market. Donald Trump seems to be a lot more crypto friendly than Joe Biden. How would crypto in the US look like in a Trump presidency versus a Biden presidency? How big of a difference is there? In what ways? I'm not asking you to endorse anybody. I'm just asking you to help us understand the difference.
Yeah, this is the first election since Grover Cleveland versus Benjamin Harrison, where two U.S. presidents are running against each other. Trump was president for 4 years and Biden was president for 4 years. The Trump administration wasn't particularly pro-crypto, but they weren't particularly anti-crypto. Crypto wasn't large enough for it to reach that level. So while the Treasury Secretary was anti-crypto, Trump himself was ambivalent. Now, lots happened in 4 years. Crypto's gone through a mega bull cycle, and it's gotten to a point where it's definitely an issue on everybody's tongue. And the differences between the two candidates couldn't be more clear. In the case of Trump, he figured out how to make money from crypto. And there's one axiom about Trump: honesty flows from economics. So because he can make money from it, it's always going to be part of his shtick. And he's raising lots of crypto money, and he's doing NFTs, and Truth Social at some point will be a crypto haven. Biden has spent the last 4 years conducting a systematic war on crypto. And anybody who tells you otherwise is a partisan who's being dishonest. It's objectively true. All the major exchanges have received Wells notices. Major projects have received Wells notices. Choke point 2.0 is underway where people are being deplatformed and debanked. Anti-clarity has come in where things like Ethereum not being security has apparently been reversed, even though the SEC was the one who declared it in the first place. And attempts to legislate have been curtailed. Like, for example, when the Senate overwhelmingly in a bipartisan fashion tried to repeal SAB 121, the president vetoed it. His own administration has written numerous reports basically calling crypto snake oil and has no use or utility. These are just facts. And I'm sorry if you're a Democrat and people want to vote for Biden. Maybe you want to vote for him for a different issue and you love his policy, but you have to acknowledge and concede that he's outsourced his policy to Elizabeth Warren. And what she's decided to do is staff the Treasury Department with people who basically want to kill crypto in the United States. So we as an industry have some hard choices because a lot of our people in our industry are young and are not Republican and are not right wing. And so they don't want to vote for Trump and they don't want to vote for a conservative option, which is why you notice there's a lot of pro crypto people, myself included, who are going to Robert Kennedy in this particular election. And I actually met with Robert Kennedy down in Austin, Texas. And I've never in my life met a political candidate who has such a raw curiosity and intellect for issues and also such a great legacy. For example, when I mentioned the Securities Exchange Act of 1933, he's like, yeah, my grandfather wrote it. It was the first commissioner. It's like, yeah, okay, that's a pretty good legacy. And he's had a front row seat to American politics since 1961 at the highest level because his uncle was the president and his dad almost became the president, but just got shot. So obviously, that's a good thing to have some diversity there. But unfortunately, Biden is not going to give us anything, and it has become an issue because at least 53 million Americans own cryptocurrency, the majority young, the majority Democrat, which translates to if you're taking money out of their pocket and hurting their gains, them saying, "Hang on a second here, Joe Biden just hurt my portfolio." You, as a political candidate, an election probably decided by less than 3% of the vote, don't want to be in a situation where you just alienated 53 million people arbitrarily and capriciously for the benefit of large financial institutions, not for the common man. So this is definitely an issue. And Biden's trying to moderate a little bit, but he just can't help himself. Had he moderated, he should have allowed SAB 121's repeal to go through. Instead, he vetoed it. Had he moderated a little bit, he could call for the resignation of Chairman Gensler. Had he moderated a little bit, he could have looked at the passage of FIT 21 with 70 plus Democrats voting on it as a opportunity to work with the Republicans in the Senate to basically pass comprehensive crypto reform. And as an industry, we've been very happy because it would have created complete clarity on what is a commodity and what is a security and how the CFTC and the SEC are going to work together to handle that. 60 plus major cryptocurrency companies got together to support FIT 21. Instead, he refuses to work with them. And instead, he wants to continue the legislation through enforcement and the anti-clarity and also the dishonesty of things. Like, for example, saying, come in and register. Well, Coinbase tried to do that for 2 years and had broker-dealer licenses. Not only were they not allowed to do that as a publicly traded company, they got sued. That's just the most dishonesty you can bring in when you say as your talking points, this is an issue of non-compliance, when everybody actually knows there is no way to comply by design. It's a Kafkaesque regulation through enforcement policy, and this is 100% owned by the Biden administration. Trump did not do this. There were some edge cases in here and there, like the Hinman case or the suit of Ripple, but those were more one-offs of particular small power structures, but there was not an all-of-government approach where the goal was to kill crypto. And when people go in November, you have to really ask yourself what matters to you. If you believe cryptocurrency and blockchain is going to be formative in the economic, political, and social systems of America and part of the antidote to get us out of this, then vote that way. If you don't care about these things, then do understand a vote for Biden is a vote for the death of the American cryptocurrency industry. And it's deeply personal to me, not just because I'm a cryptocurrency entrepreneur, but because I got a letter a little while ago from the Swiss government inviting me to a 10-year anniversary to the founding of Ethereum. And the letter, the second page of it kind of broke my heart a little bit. It was very bittersweet. They mentioned that since we formed Ethereum in Switzerland, 1,290 businesses, cryptocurrency businesses, were formed there. And the total value of those businesses is over $380 billion. So when you think about that, you ask yourself, how many of those businesses would be formed in the United States of America had we had regulatory clarity? How much of jobs were created? And that's just Switzerland, not Singapore, not Abu Dhabi, not Dubai. You're probably looking at over $1 trillion of value, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and tens of thousands of businesses over the next 5 or 10 years. And what that would translate to is improving not only the GDP of America, but also helping us pay off our national debt and make our money better and these types of things. By seeding all of that, that's basically like saying, take Microsoft, Google, and Apple and Tesla and just go put them all in Germany. or go put them all in Abu Dhabi or something like that. How many times can we do that as a country before we go bankrupt? How many revolutions can we miss out on before America collapses as the nation state? So that's the real life consequence of this policy. It's not number go up or number go down, or Bitcoin's not going to do as well, or Ethereum's not going to do as well. It translates to we as a country have higher unemployment. We as a country have less jobs. We as a country have less economic competitiveness, and ultimately we collapse as a country if we keep doing this. And this is directly at the feet of the Biden administration, and they have shown no desire to work with our industry. It's anti-desire. So come November, do understand that these elections do have consequences. And my recommendation is choose a candidate who's pro-crypto at every level, from the local to the federal. And it doesn't have to be a Republican. It could be a third party. Any vote outside of this is expressing your interest in that respect.
You got to get out there and vote. This year is hugely important. But let's zoom out, and I want to talk about Cardano today. So we are on the verge of, I think you said, the most significant hard fork in the history of the project. The Chang hard fork, the Voltaire era. Help us understand why this is so significant.
So on-chain governance is so hard that people like Vitalik write blog posts saying you shouldn't do it. It's very difficult. The entire Bitcoin community doesn't do it, which is why you can never upgrade anything. So what do you give up and what do you gain? So in terms of what do you gain, if you get on-chain governance right, you can move very quickly, upgrade your system, stay competitive and relevant forever. You also have the resources in a decentralized way to be able, like a government does, to maintain your affairs, whatever those affairs are. They could be adoption, branding, marketing, development, research, national defense, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's what you gain. What do you give up? Well, you have to get thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people who've never met each other, live in many different countries, speak different languages, different cultures, to somehow agree to do stuff together. Not so easy. So we as an ecosystem spent 2 years having this conversation, and we wrote a SIP called SIP 1694, named after the birthday of Voltaire. And basically the SIP tries to achieve three outcomes. One, it wants to create an effective government. Two, it wants to create an efficient government. And three, it wants to create a high integrity government. And you add these things together, I like calling it the governance trilemma. Usually you get two of the three, but not all three. So China, for example, is quite efficient and effective. They make decisions very quickly. And if you look at the last 30 years, they've gone from a backwater to a superpower. It's hard to argue with that efficacy. Look at the growth of high-speed rail or these types of things. On the other hand, doesn't have a lot of integrity. Why? Because they're perfectly willing to throw millions of people under the bus or do very unethical things like have camps or what have you in order to speed up their growth. So like many of these autocratic authoritarian regimes, they're efficient and potentially effective depending on the wisdom of the leadership, but no integrity. Switzerland, on the other hand, is a high integrity culture, and it's a very effective culture. They tend to make the right decisions, and they tend to protect human rights, but horrifically inefficient. And if you don't believe me, try to build something in Zurich. You'll be talking about it for 10 years before you even get the meeting to talk about it. Okay, so it takes a really long time to do anything in Switzerland. Why? Because they're protecting a 500-600-year-old institution. And so you gotta work with that. So that's an example where it's missing something. So how do you get all three? How do you make the right decision all the time? You make that decision quickly, and when you make that decision, it doesn't leave people behind. So with SIP 1694, it's an experiment to try to do all three of those things. And boy, is it hard. You have a constitution you got to write, an on-chain representation of things. And first, what does that even mean in a blockchain context? What are fundamental blockchain rights? They're different than human rights. They're scoped to the dApps and users and these types of things. And very few people have ever had the audacity to try to write a blockchain constitution, much less a blockchain that's understandable by the blockchain itself. So it's actually written in a formal prose and code. Second, how do you build institutions that are servant leaders to work with the government so that they can help take very complicated things and get them to a state you can vote on them, like a budget or a hard fork or a protocol parameter change or these types of things, or else you'll never have efficacy or efficiency. And third, how do you build the right on-chain government that represents everybody? So what we did as an ecosystem is we took a constitutional republic model, so you have elected representatives, and combined it with a new form of governance called liquid democracy, liquid feedback, and which basically you register a DREP and people delegate to you, but they can pull their delegation at any time. So your power goes up and down on an epic by epic basis. So these two things together with an on-chain constitution is basically SIP 1694. And this is something that took a very long time to figure out. The community came together, we wrote a proto design, and then we had 25 workshops in more than 20 countries over a 2-year period and many iterations. We've had a long standing for over a year as an ecosystem testnet, SanchoNet, where people try to attack it and all these different types of things. And now we're at a point where probably in the next 3 to 5 days, the final version of the node 9.0, will be ready to go. It's fork ready, which means then as soon as 70% of stake pool operators upgrade, a hard fork will be initiated and the entire governance system will be turned on. And there's no going back. You now have a complete on-chain government wired in with a 1.5 billion ADA treasury system that's been just accumulating over the last 7 years. And it's at the fingertips of millions of people who've never met each other, don't work together, and somehow they're going to be able to use this system to quickly make decisions and that are in the best interest of the Cardano ecosystem. And here are some examples. The annual budget. There's a lot of desire to spend between 100 to 250 million per year on various things for Cardano. Like people often complain, well, Cardano doesn't have good marketing. All right, well, coalition of people are forming right now to fix that. There's JPEG Stores leading the way along with Inter6 Marketing Committee. 25 to 50 companies will probably come together and they're going to go make a recommendation for all the marketing they want to do on an annual basis, probably scoped into about a $15 to $25 million annual spend. What does that translate to? It translates to a Cardano booth at every major conference, biweekly hackathons, and all this stuff. Okay, great. Well, what holds them accountable? Who holds them accountable? How do you have audit and oversight? How do you make sure the money's well spent? Who exactly is going to execute, and how do you fire them if they don't do that right job? That's what governance solves for you. It's not just about giving away the money. It's about having governance come there, and the community can speak with one voice, the intent to market and brand, and then have institutions and in the racy responsible parties to be able to actually execute and get it done. And they have a track record and they're held accountable to that, and they can be terminated in the event that they don't do that. And that's just one of dozens of things that will probably get funded. Well, this on-chain government now has to cogitate over that, mull over that, debate that. They're actually going to build a budget and start talking about it, and then at some point approve it, probably before the end of the year. At the same time, the constitution that we fork with is the interim constitution, bootstrap constitution. Like the United States had the Articles of Confederation, we used that to bootstrap the US Constitution. So we're doing the exact same thing. So 50 workshops are being held in the next 4 months across the world in 50 different countries with a nice balance of all 6 continents. And each of those are going to elect delegates, and all of those delegates are going to descend into Argentina for a constitutional convention where an on-chain constitution is going to be written. Once ratified there, ratified on-chain. So this on-chain government actually has to figure out how to ratify a constitution after people from all over the world come together and actually write something new. And so whatever government we have now will be considerably better as of Q1 of 2025. So you have a budget, you have hard forks, you have a product roadmap, and you have a constitutional convention. And this on-chain government has to do all of those things the next 180 days. And we're backing as an ecosystem that we can do that. Now tell me, how do you compete with that if you're Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of these other guys? Because you've harnessed the wisdom of millions of people, and you've proven that you can move just as fast as a centralized company can do, but there's no central point of failure. There's no governing organization. There's no escrow keys. There's no like special foundation off there in the distance that is there. No, it's truly decentralized. It's a decentralized country. It's a decivilization in its own right. And it's self-healing, it's self-reinforcing. If somebody dies, there's a way to replace them. There's no money to steal because it's all managed on chain. It's not a DAO. It's far, far beyond that. It is a digital nation in the truest sense of like what Blasi was talking about in his book he wrote recently. So that's what's turning on. And it's the magnum opus of the project. The Age of Voltaire is the last picture in the roadmap. And It's the hardest part to do because actually no one solved the problem yet. We like solving first principles thinking problems all the time, and we had to figure out scalability and we had to figure out interoperability. So scalability, Ouroboros, Laos, and Hydra, and rollups, and all these other things. And we talk about interoperability, partner chains, and Minotaur, and these types of things. But governance, goddamn, that's Voltaire. And it's been the privilege of a lifetime to work on it. And what just blows me away is every time the community is asked to come in and do this, they do. The elections are just a great example of that with the Interim Constitutional Committee. Literally just had a 4-hour debate. And here's the magic of it. When we go and listen to the debates between Trump and Biden in 11 days, they're both going to go up there and say, that person over there is literally Hitler. And if you elect them, they will have death camps and the world will come to an end. In this constitutional debate, 21 candidates from all these different places in the world, not a single one of them attacked each other. They just talked about what they were doing and why they're the best choice and what they believe in and their philosophy and these types of things. So it was issues based. That's a very, very, very healthy culture. And that's the type of healthy culture that you need to get to good governance, to build good institutions and constitutional representation. And it's a great experiment. So we're leading the industry, and there's certainly been other initiatives like Tezos with their governance stuff, and OpenGov with Polkadot, and Dash has a lot of cool stuff they've done. And we've learned from all of them, and I hope this is going to be as revolutionary as Ouroboros has been for us. And I really do believe it'll get there. It's going to be a wild 180 days, though, because there's just so much to do.
Charles, what do you think of the Bitcoin ecosystem? Like 10 years out, do you think the Bitcoin ecosystem will be viable? Because the stuff being built on Cardano for the first time ever can now be built on Bitcoin. And that is, many people say, the most decentralized chain. Cardano's up there. You can judge it different ways. But what do you think?
Yeah, I often get asked about Bitcoin, and unfortunately, it's always this, let's try to goad Charles into criticizing Bitcoin and find a way to come at him. And Cointelegraph is notorious for that. And, at the end of the day, it's not that I don't like Bitcoin. When you look at Bitcoin, it had to make a philosophical decision of what does it want to be when it grows up. It started as the everything coin because it was the only option. So I came in very early, as did Eric Voorhees and all these other people, and we wanted Bitcoin to be everything. So, a lot of us worked on projects related to Bitcoin. I was the founding chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation's Education Committee. I started the Bitcoin Education Project. I worked with all the OG Bitcoiners, whether it be Roger Ver, Andreas Antonopoulos, all these kinds of people that are kind of into the ethos of the past. And then right around 2013, there was a sea change where all those initial waves of attempts to make Bitcoin better, whether it be color coins or master coin or these types of things, they're just stalled out because the protocol didn't have the ability to upgrade itself. And so a lot of people, they said, let's go do something else. So the Bitcoin core developers said, if you don't like it, fork it. And we said, sure. So some people forked Bitcoin. Some people built new projects. We went and built new project, Ethereum, which was made up of people who were former Mastercoin and Colorcoin developers who spent a long time trying to figure out how to issue assets on Bitcoin and write smart contracts on Bitcoin and these types of things. Couldn't get there. And that was fine for that time period. And there wasn't a lot of animosity. There was more curiosity and a good conversation. Other people stuck with it and tried to keep upgrading Bitcoin. Roger Ver was a great example of that. And it led to the block wars, which eventually created Bitcoin Cash. Something happened to the ethos of Bitcoin after Bitcoin Cash, where we saw this toxic wave of maximalism go over the space. And instead of just, I disagree with you, but we could be friends, it's, I disagree with you, and you're an evil criminal who is a scammer shitcoiner who needs to be thrown in prison for robbing people. And you say, well, what about all this stuff I'm doing? They say, well, there's a pre-mine, or there's this, or proof of stake is a scam at central banking, or what have you. And that maximalism completely took all the air out of the room, all the debate out of the room. And at the same time, they had anti-intellectualism, where they said, okay, every design decision of Bitcoin is perfect and necessary. The latency, the settlement time, all this type of stuff, perfect and necessary. The smart contract model, perfect and necessary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And magic technology XYZ will solve your problem. Sidechains, 2014, they published the paper. Where are they? Lightning, I guess that's solving all the problems. Now we have BitVM. as the next big thing. So this magic MacGuffin technology comes out, and then that's going to kill the entire altcoin space. And Bitcoin is the only source of truth. And then there's this anti-intellectualism about embracing people. So when I was in the Bitcoin space, we all hated the banks. And we were all like, we're gonna get rid of the central banks, and we are our own money, we're sound money. And the number one event this year for Bitcoin is the ETF approval and BlackRock entering in, and large quantities of the supply going to Mike Saylor and BlackRock and other people, where they have soft power now because they can control the price and the listing and other things of Bitcoin. It's an extraordinary thing. And so you see all this happening in their culture and their ethos. And the problem is it's really hard to do anything meaningful, because at the end of the day, if I go and engage an average Bitcoin maximalist, they start from the position that I'm a criminal. They start from the position I'm a charlatan. They start from the position that I have defrauded people because of the existence of Cardano. And then they go to regulators. And I know they've done this, where they've talked to senators and congressmen and said, this legislation you're writing to regulate crypto, what you should do is say Bitcoin is fine, it's a commodity, and everything else is illegal. So if you're going to lawmakers trying to make our business illegal, if you every day wake up and call everyone a criminal, and then you discount every innovation that's happened since 2009 as unnecessary because it's not there, you start looking like crypto Mennonites or Amish people, who are like, oh, the technology of the 19th century is great, and we don't need anything more. No cell phones or medicine or any of these things. God's word is all we need. The word of Satoshi is all we need. That's literally where you're at. And it would be fine if they were like the Amish and the Mennonites, where they just stuck to their own devices and they were nice people. And if you were in trouble and you ran into them, they'd help you out. Instead, they're anti-Mennonites in that they just beat the hell out of you. They come and actively try to get people arrested, actively try to attack people. Every opportunity to attack people they do. Like when I met with RFK, and RFK and I tweeted a picture together, and I'm talking to a presidential candidate about pro-crypto regulation. That's universally beneficial for every dApp builder, every cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin. Every maximalist said, you are standing next to a criminal shitcoin scammer. One tweet after another tweet after another tweet after, and not just some random Twitter troll. People with million followers, people with podcasts, people write books, these types of things. Okay. So the people you actually have to pay attention to because of their scale. That is the nature of Bitcoin. That's a challenge of Bitcoin. Now, that said, there are opportunities to work with, despite this insanely toxic, very self-destructive cargo cult of crypto Mennonites, the Bitcoin maximalist people. You set those aside for a bit. Reasonable Bitcoin holders, we can build bridges. In fact, I would love for Cardano to figure out how to build the first trustless ZK recursive bridge between Bitcoin and another cryptocurrency using BitVM. That would be a heck of a lot of fun to do. And also, Cardano, whether they like it or not, is the spiritual successor to a lot of Bitcoin's technology. When they were writing years ago how to improve UTXO by extending it, guess who did that? Ergo and Cardano. We did it, and we wrote papers on it and showed how to do it. When they're talking years ago, Satoshi himself tried to figure out how to make Bitcoin script more expressive for smart contracts. The inflation bug scared the hell out of everybody, so they dialed it back. We weren't dissuaded by that, figured out how to do it as an ecosystem. Now we have Plutus and all these other things. So if you're a Bitcoin developer who likes functional programming and you believe in the UTXO model, your only two options to really fully realize that are Ergo and Cardano. So obviously you got to look at these two and say, okay, there's real value here, because this is a test net for us to figure out how to actually build these applications. Even if you hate Cardano, it's a good environment to build your Bitcoin applications in, say for color coins. If you read Manny's stuff or Chroma Wallet or any of these things I grew up with way back in the day, you know what we did? We created the Cardano Native Asset Standard that said, that's a good idea. And let's do that idea to its logical conclusion on extended UTXO. And now over 8 million assets have been issued on Cardano. So all these ordinals and these other things that are being issued in Bitcoin land, a lot of knowledge and inspiration has been gained because of the existence of the Cardano ecosystem. And then Hydra is another example of that, isomorphic state channels. Lightning is a fundamentally good idea. Why it's so hard on Bitcoin is you're here and you need just a little bit more semantical richness in your programming model. And then you actually have enough to do it in its full vision. We have that in Cardano. So now we're figuring out how to get video games to run on freaking Hydra channels, where every frame is transaction, all this kinds of stuff. And it's working just beautifully and it's moving very quickly. And in just a few years' time, we've been able to kind of build up this whole corpus, whereas 10 years of progress with payment state channels on Bitcoin, they're still not where they need to be, and they don't have enough traction yet. Okay, because of the restrictiveness of the model. Everybody builds on Bitcoin, just suffer, and they say that's a feature, not a bug. Fine. Be digital gold and do that thing. But just please, for the love of God, don't attack us. So, where and when we can work with people, where and when we can connect with people, we do. I just really wish they would tone down the maximalism. And I just really wish they would stop the attacks on the altcoin space because it's so blatantly unnecessary. And even in just this rant right here, here's what's going to happen. People are going to take 20-second, 30-second clips, as they have done now for 2 years, of me, put them on Twitter, and then dogpiling low IQ maximalism there. And then you'll have Max Kaiser come on and call me a sack of shit, or Jeffrey Epstein, or these types, because he's literally called me that publicly. He called me Jeffrey Epstein because one of my companies in Wyoming took paycheck protection money in 2020. I'm not sure how you equate those two things there, Maxi, but that's what Maxi does. Maxi pad in the brain. It's a crazy thing.
I know we probably only have time for maybe one more question each. I have a fun one. Austin, should I go first? You wanna?
Please, I want to hear it.
Okay. We did something like this. Let me share my screen. We did something like this with Raul Paul. The audience loved it. Feel free to, do this. If you don't want to, we can cut it out. You famously tried to buy or signaled that maybe you'd want to buy CoinDesk last year, and that, the mainstream media is in different cases is unfair to Cardano. You mentioned Cointelegraph. I don't know if you can see the screen. I have a list here of different media outlets: Bankless, Fox Business, CoinDesk, The Block. I'm sure you've seen a list like this before, a tier list. I was wondering if you could give us, as far as who treats Cardano fairly, who does good work, the tier list.
Ha, this is going to be fun. Okay. CoinDesk, let's go ahead and put them in a B to a C. And the reason being is that,
B or C?
yeah, let's put it in B, because I'm 50-50 on that. So there's been some things that they've done which are quite nice, like they've accurately and fairly reported the hard forks and things on Ouroboros and other things like that. And then there's been other things that they've done I've just scratched my head at. And we thought about buying them. And when we looked at the financials and other things, we decided to pass on that because there would be a mismatch of what we perceive to be the value and their expectations. And that's fine. New management seems to have improved a little bit. So I'm optimistic that over time, the relationship with CoinDesk will improve itself, especially since certain people have left. Cointelegraph is a C, and not because they hate us, but more because of their journalistic model that they have. The nature of how they write articles and source things, the franchise model, it's the monster of the week. And so if we happen to be hot and sexy, we get radically positive articles. But if we're not in that list, they'll just shit on us for that. Crypto Banter is a D, and that's Rand's show. And I don't understand why Rand does what he does. He loves Luna and FTX and these guys, and hates us. And he used to be a friendly guy, and I used to go on a show and we used to talk. And now Cardano's worthless and evil, and we're all gonna fall out of the top 10, and there's no real value there, and there's no dApps and other things. It's just crazy. The block I'd put in a B. I've never had a big issue with them. Decrypt, I'd put in a B as well.
And by the way, please don't feel like we're fishing to get pushed in the S tier or the A tier.
No, 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 no.
Like, be honest, we're not Crypto Crow, who's not even on this list. I
Real
know.
Vision, Real Vision is an A, and the reason being is that I can separate Raul personally and some of the crap he does from the accessibility of Real Vision. Every time I've gone on Real Vision, and we've talked about Cardano, these been some of their highest rated episodes and most positively received episodes. And Real Vision broadcasted it without any censorship or things like that. So I just think this is a case where the founder doesn't really like Cardano for whatever reason, but the rank and file are willing to give us a fair shake, and we really do enjoy that. Fox Business also I'd put in an A because I have a lot of great relationships there, and every time we've gone, they've been nothing but fair to us. like I've been on Maria's show, and I know Eleanor Tennant and other people there, and they've never really written negative, trashy tabloid crap about Cardano. If they mention us at all, because they seldom mention crypto, but when they do, and we happen to be in the conversation, it's always been positive, and that's always nice. I think that's pretty cool. I wish we get more coverage and more in-depth coverage, but remember, they're not trade media. Cointelegraph is 100% cryptocurrency, whereas Fox is, broad stuff. CNBC Squawk Box, there's been a few negative things here and there, but I put them B, and that's the same. What Bitcoin did, I'm not sure about that one.
Up near the top, in the middle, near the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know that publication. I'm
What
sorry.
Bitcoin did, it's Peter McCormick's podcast.
Oh, okay. I know Peter. He's a piece of shit. D. He shit over us all the time and said Cardano's horrible and I'm a scammer, an evil person, and all these things. Oh, and actually, no, that's Corey Klippenstein. Yeah, Peter's been a little bit more fair, but not so much so. Moving up to C. We'll do C there. And whose podcast is up only?
So far, what we have left is we have Bankless, which is, Bankless. Up
Oh yeah,
only.
they're in D. Bankless bastards.
Okay. Anything more to say on Bankless? A lot of people like them.
Well, I mean, just for, the greatest example would be when they asked me to go on their show, and I said, okay, well, you went to a Solana event, and there's Rare Evo. You can come, and if you actually want to understand Cardano, because you're claiming you don't know anything about it, go there. There's probably going to be 100, 200 Cardano projects represented, and you get to see the entire community and just go and talk to everybody. And I said, I'll give you guys a 5-hour interview if you want it, and we could talk to. I'm blue in the face about anything, nothing off limits. And they said, no, 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 we want you to come on for 45 minutes and we can just basically ask you, why is Cardano not dead? And prove to us Cardano's not dead. They're not legitimate people. And some of the comments that they've made throughout the history have been just blatantly offensive and unfair. And it's because they're not actually interested in having an intellectually honest conversation about Cardano. They've already taken a position. It is a dead project, and we're scammers, and their job is not to get lunaed. And so they just want to inform their audience every single day that Cardano is going to die and represent us in the most negative light possible. I have a lot of respect for publications that maybe they did something wrong, but then they admit it and they say to themselves, hey, we could do better. And in the case of Bankless, they just can't get there. They just have made up their mind. And Rand has too, for example, crypto banter. And that's what earns you a D in my mind, is that you're dogmatically adhering to a single belief regardless of the evidence that you have there. Coin Bureau is a C. There's been a relationship back and forth there. And you guys have always been fair. So I'll put you guys up in the S tier, not just because we're being interviewed, but I mean, come on, you have a huge audience. You've always been friendly. You're nice guys, and you try to get things right and accurate. And that's the difference between A and S. Is it's not just did we get a fair shake, but also if you get something wrong, you go out of your way to try to correct that, bring people on, have a real conversation in a non-adversarial way, and let them talk their book. And so that's an example of a good institution. And who's
Wow.
up only? Which person
Yeah.
is that?
Up only was more prominent in 2021 cycle. It's Kobe and Ledger. They've been around, in crypto for a while. I can't recall what companies they work for. Kobe's like a dev. He's often, get called. You had probably guys had an exchange on Twitter. If you're not, they're
Yeah.
not really that relevant this cycle.
I don't know him, so I can't rate him. I'm sorry.
Okay. Wow.
This was great. And obviously, we got a discount Altcoin Daily at the top, but audience at home, please tell us. But I appreciate, Charles, you ranking us high. Maybe just like give a summation. Now we see the whole list, summation on what you want to see or who didn't we include or.
Well, there's a lot of small podcasts that I tend to go on, and then there's broader podcasts that aren't crypto specific, but they do cover our industry. Like Lex Friedman, for example, got tremendously interested in crypto in 2021, and he was a great guy. He went out and interviewed everybody, and everybody, literally. I think he even interviewed Richard Hart, for God's sakes. And so I put him in S tier because he is the model. If you run a podcast, you enter in with a beginner's mind and you say, look, guys, I don't know anything about this. Tell me about it. And I'll spend hours and hours and hours trying to understand it. And my job isn't to go and be an adversarial person, but rather create a platform for people to explain who they are and why they do what they do, but also have enough of a backbone that if they're spreading propaganda or lying, you call them on that. And throughout his whole career, he's done that. And it was probably to this day the most enjoyable interview I've ever had. Episode 192 on Lex Friedman, and we were there for 5.5 hours straight. And he's one of the smartest interviewers I've ever interacted with because he's got a PhD in artificial intelligence. He's a solid guy. Dad was a famous plasma physicist. But more importantly, the questions he asked, the probing nature of them, and the holism of it, it really allowed a person to be a person. Joe Rogan is also in that same category. It's an S tier podcast, and every time he's talked about crypto, he's brought a few people on, like he brought Andreas Antonopoulos on his podcast, and he was very fair. And he's an MMA guy. He's a comedian. He's not exactly like Mr. Inventor here. He's not a technology podcast, but what he does represent is the mainstream ethos where everyday people are curious about this new thing that they hear. And what he tried to do is fairly represent the industry as a whole. And so every time he's talked about crypto, I don't think he's ever mentioned Cardano, but crypto in general, I think it's been exactly what we look for. Whereas if you compare that, for example, to like MSNBC or CNN or a lot of these other channels, Washington Post, what have you, those mainstream media guys, it's very clear that they're following an agenda, and the agenda is, well, we like the guy in the White House right now. So, what we're going to do is we're just going to be anti-crypto. So crypto equals Hamas, crypto equals, terrorist financing, crypto equals no use case and utility and everybody losing all their money. That that's not true. And they know that that's not true. They know that this is a real industry, but they're covering that because they're propaganda factories, and to Fox Business's credit and to CNBC's credit, at least what they're doing is treating it like an asset class, and they're mentioning it in a way as they would an asset class. That's the best I could ask for that medium, because I believe the medium is outdated and it's clearly broken. But you don't go and write article after article after article that say the only use case of crypto is child fee or Hamas financing or North Korea getting nuclear weapons or something like that. You just don't do that. And then unfortunately, the mainstream media, that's literally what the coverage has been the last 24, 36 months. And it's really hurt our ability as an industry to navigate. And, it makes these things a bit challenging for us. But, I hope that gives your audience a sense of, how I think about these things. I don't look for shilling. I don't look for, hey, this is something you should buy and this coin is shit or this. That's not the point of it. Media is all about making somebody aware and expanding that awareness about why people do what they do. And then there is an accountability component. If they don't do what they say they're going to do, and that's public, you have to call them out on that and ask them on that. Like, for example, there's a lot of interviews with Elon Musk, and he's become too egotistical and big, but they should have a real conversation about self-driving cars, because you can verbatim look at him year after year after year after year, and he says, we will have self-driving cars by this date. 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, by this date, by this date, by this date. So then when he brings it up in an interview, you say, well, hang on a second here. Track record's not so good. And then he freaks out and says, oh, how dare you guys? You're a dishonest media. The Trump does a lot of the same stuff. He's like, guys, it's not that. It's just you've been promised me this thing for like 7 years now, and every prediction you've made is wrong. Hang on, why aren't you, why is it this time going to be different? And that's a fair question to ask. And then I'm a Musk fan. I like Elon Musk and so forth, but you have to hold them accountable when they clearly say things that didn't happen. Or the OpenAI lawsuit, where he's calling it closed AI and all this other stuff. Let's be honest here. It was sour grapes over the fact that Tesla couldn't absorb OpenAI. That's the big issue with him. He's angry that Papa Satya got it instead of Papa Musk, and Sam's a bit smarter than the average bear on these things. So he's pissed at that. So, okay, he sues over it and he's trying to say all this stuff. But when you look at the emails and the other thing, it's very clear that they caught wind that he was trying to take over and embrace and extinguish the company, and they didn't sign up for that. They wanted to go in a different direction. So, you ask him about it, is that fair? Yeah. And if he freaks out about it, well, that's up to him. Good media has that capacity. Do we have good media with respect to Musk coverage? No. 100% of media against Musk right now is adversarial. The pay package is one of the greatest examples of our lifetime of that. So in 2018, he went to the board and the shareholders and asked them a very simple thing. If I make you $1 trillion, I get 5%. Yen? I think any reasonable human being would be like, okay, but what if you don't? Well, if I don't, I get nothing. Okay, so you're willing to work for free unless I get $1 trillion valuation. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, here's 5%. I mean, it's like, yeah, I can't meet a person. I've not met a single person who'd say no to that. It's one of the craziest. It's absurd to say that you're going to go make a $50 billion company, $1 trillion company. Literally, that's what happened, though. And then after it happened, even though 80% of the shareholders, 73% of the non-Musk shareholders, by the way, said yes to it, and the board said yes to it, a judge, at the behest of a shareholder who owned 9 shares that he purchased at $200 that are now worth over $2,000, decided to overturn the will of a supermajority of the shareholders and the board, and in the process of doing that, tried to give $5 billion of stock to lawyers and say that's in the best interest of the shareholders of Tesla. Then Musk goes back to the shareholders and says, this is insane. Give me what I'm due. And the shareholders approve it again. And then you have the media covering that, and 100% of the stories in the mainstream media are Musk is evil. He's manipulated retail shareholders, just attack after attack after attack. Why? Because he bought Twitter and he's competing with the mainstream media. So the book is Kill Musk. And any accomplishment the guy has is evil. Neuralink. Hey, this guy's playing fucking Civilization 6 with his brain, and look at all this cool stuff. Oh my God, it's so amazing. Oh, well, the wires retracted a little bit, but he's still able to use it. Yeah, but the wires retracted. So yeah, it's very dangerous. And then SpaceX, literally, he took something the size of the Statue of Liberty. The Starship is bigger than the Statue of Liberty, and blasted it off into space, and it landed. And they're like, well, the first few of them blew up, and it's bad, somehow, but Musk won't accomplish. SpaceX is still bad. Starlink. Yeah, astronomers are angry. There's too many lights in the sky now. It's interfering in their telescopes. It's like, my God, it's the craziest shit you see when you read this. Because again, they hate the guy. So that's our problem in mainstream media. They have a philosophical and political narrative, and if you step outside of that narrative, no matter what the truth is, you get railroaded and destroyed. So when you talk about media in its whole, I only admire and respect media that doesn't have that philosophy. I say, if you're going to talk about something, talk with a beginner's mind, try to understand and acknowledge up front what your biases are. If I talk about crypto, I'm biased because I created Cardano. I'm an Ethereum co-founder. Obviously, I'm a crypto guy, and I am a very particular type of crypto guy. Am I going to be the most objective person in the world talking about Solana? No, I'm going to bring out the Nintendo cartridge and blow it off and these types of things. Okay, that's just who I am. All right. Don't expect me to be objective in my assessments of the people that have made different trade-offs, because I've already in my head said they're making a mistake in their design. However, I can be intellectually honest enough to admit that. Second, I can at least fairly represent good things that happen across the industry. Vitalik has done phenomenal things in terms of Ethereum. Solana has demonstrated a really amazing way to growth hack. Polygon has also done the same in a certain respect. ZK Sync is doing very interesting things. Starkware is doing very interesting things. And that's what real discussions and dialogues are about. They don't force on the wedge issues and the differences or exacerbate where we have differences. You try to find some common ground in the conversation where you could connect with people and understand. That's why I really admire Lex and Joe, because throughout their entire career, that's what's made them successful. They've brought on all these different guests, and some are hyper controversial, like Douglas Murray, or just recently, Lex brought on Kevin Spacey. Okay, that's pretty controversial there. And yet they're able to have a conversation. You don't think, look at when he brought on the Palestinians and the Israelis. He interviewed Bibi Netanyahu and somebody who's on an Israeli watch list for terrorism and for Palestine. He brought on both guests. And talk to them. So the fact that he's able to have conversations on both sides and let them explain why they do what they do. And if they're unable or unwilling to do that, the words themselves explore things. Like it was very troubling when you watch the Bibi Netanyahu interview. It's short, terse, and it's very confined. And you live saying he's not saying a lot. And obviously he's not willing to have a real dialogue. The same happened when he interviewed the head of the NIH, whose name will come to me in a moment, Francis Collins. And he asked him all these questions about COVID and these other things. And Francis, very narrow. And you're saying to yourself, I don't feel transparency here. Not once did he have to go and attack that person and say, you're an unethical person and a dishonest person, rah, rah. He just lets them talk. And you, the audience, are not being talked down. You're judging the person based upon the argumentation, the presentation, the self-reflection, and these types of things. And in my view, the best podcasts, they give the guest the space, and the best media, they give the project and the person the space to be able to do that. And then if you want to editorialize, you absolutely can, especially if you feel that the user should know something. Like you say, by the way, the guy talking owns 30% of this product he's pitching. Oh, by the way, the guy talking went to prison and they went to prison for this crime or whatever. Then you're contextualizing relevant information so they can help make that decision. And that's the real difference, I think, between the A and the S tier, is that editorialization that is fair and relevant, if that makes sense. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but I mean, this is the most controversial part of the podcast, right? We're rating people.
I loved it. And I appreciate you playing ball. 2 final questions, Charles,
Sure.
and we'll let you go. I cannot let you leave without asking you about Midnight. Is it happening this year? Why do we need a sidechain if we have Hydra? And as a Cardano holder, will I get an airdropped token?
I love it. You guys cut right to the point. So partner chains are a whole different animal than Hydra. Hydra is really a dApp by dApp thing. And the point of Hydra is to take all this stuff that you do in the main chain and put it into something that's domain specific for you. So the canonical example there is like a poker game. So let's say we want to play a poker game. You really ask yourself, is the fact that I had 2 aces and bet, $5, 6 hands into a game we played 26 years ago, is that something we should preserve for the rest of time and history on the blockchain? Probably not. Why are we using a blockchain? We want the cards to be fair. We want to make sure that you can't see my cards. We want it, when I win and lose, for those wins and losses to be preserved. So we want to be able to prove that the people I'm playing against are humans. These are the kinds of things you think about in your game design. You're not thinking about how do I preserve and protect all those things and forever put them on the blockchain. The auditability has to be there. The reconstructability has to be there, but not necessarily the actual raw data. Hydra is built for that, whether it be a payment system or an application or a video game. Like one of the projects we're working on is we're trying to get Doom to run on a Hydra channel, and it would be really cool to play that real time. Probably not good that every frame in your Doom experience that's running is permanently on the Cardano blockchain. Doesn't make any sense, right? But you can do that in a Hydra channel. Midnight is what's example of a partner chain. And partner chain is a very different concept than a side chain or even a layer 2. So it basically says, okay, how, if blockchains were actually people or organizations, could they partner with each other? So if I'm a new chain, what do I need? I need liquidity, infrastructure, decentralization, security, et cetera, et cetera. I need all these different services and utilities. And if I'm a new chain, what am I paying with? Well, new chain has a token. So I'm going to prepare to give some of my token to another chain to provide those services for me. So that's a partnership. So Midnight is providing a new service to the entire cryptocurrency industry. So it's going to work with Ethereum and Bitcoin and Solana and other systems. And that service is computational privacy, which in itself is a super useful thing. That basically blockchains can't currently keep secrets very well. Yet every business and regulatory schema in the entire world requires you to keep secrets. From McDonald's to Microsoft, you need to keep a secret. McDonald's is not going to tell you how much money's in the cash register. It's not going to tell you when Billy's working and how many hours he's working, these types of things. That's proprietary private business information to that franchise. Analogously, Microsoft absolutely is not going to tell you what it's doing with the Department of Defense. Okay, that's their business, and that's actually clearanced work, and they would go to prison if they revealed that. Okay, so those organizations require to keep a secret. So how do secrets work in blockchain land when everything is transparent, time-stamped, auditable, and publicly accessible. You need some sort of sophisticated stack that you can put on. So what Midnight did is figured that out. It's called Kachina. It allows you to have private smart contracts. You write them in TypeScript. And the idea is a service-oriented model where you have an app on Ethereum or an app on Cardano or an app on Solana, what have you. And just like the API economy that we've all come to know and love in Web 2, like if you're creating an AI application, you're probably not going to go build your own chat GPT. You're going to call OpenAPI over an API. And that's how you get your AI into your application. So similarly, be an Ethereum app, you can pay an Ether and call into Midnight for the privacy stuff that you want. So why would I want to do that? Well, we already covered the business side, but what about automated regulation? What if Uniswap wants to blacklist all US users, but not introduce total centralization and have an entity do all that? Well, what if settlement could be compliance and you could build that whole thing as a series of smart contracts? There's personally identifiable information. There's all this stuff that's private. And the public stuff is what happens inside the system. And you can buy it. We call that RVTP, Regulated Value Transfer Protocol. This is where the industry is going. The legacy world and the crypto world are colliding into each other. And one part is real world assets like securities and land and these types of things. And another part are DAOs and the management of them. And another part is the automation of regulation like KYC and AML and these things, but preserving the crypto ethos of can't be evil and not being spied on or these things. So privacy does matter, and you need a framework to do that. So that's what Midnight is doing. And because it's universally useful, it's not just a Cardano specific thing. The point of the service layer of Cardano, the partner chain framework, is to give people across the spectrum the ability to do that. Now, who makes the blocks? The blocks, there's a protocol called Minotaur that allows what's called multi-resource consensus. And in the beginning, the blocks are all made by the SPOs, which means Midnight has to pay for that. So its tokens get paid to the stake pool operators and the ADA holders because they're doing the work of maintaining that system. And in terms of airdrop, absolutely. Every person has ADA, could be eligible for it, just depending on whether they do some work because they have to launch the network. So yeah, you're not going to just get it as an airdrop. You have to mine blocks to get your thing. And so we'll announce the tokenomics at a later date. But I think that's very fair. And it's a model for all decentralized services. So right now we're entering with computational privacy because the industry needs it. But then there's also decentralized social networks. There's also decentralized infrastructure like storage, like competing with Infura and Alchemy. There's also, for example, World Mobile, that's decentralized physical infrastructure play with telecommunications. There's also decentralized AI, like if you're going to compete with OpenAI. And here's the magic of the partner chains framework. It's a framework that basically allows you to focus on what your service is, and you could build a collection of bespoke stuff starting from the consensus on down. So right now it's Cardano takes care of your block production, but what if you want to do both proof of work and proof of stake together? Well, you can do that with multi-resource consensus. Why would I want to do that in a framework? Well, I'd want to do that in a framework because let's say I'm doing a decentralized large language model. What's my number one concern there? There are two. The number one is computation. Where the hell do I get the compute power to run this thing? And the number two is where do I get the data? So what if you had algorithms, consensus algorithms to incentivize the inference and training, so the proof of useful work, and algorithms to incentivize data, like a proof of data, to combine with the proof of stake protocol to give you fast finality and transactional speed and these types of things. Those three things together would incentivize the creation of a decentralized large language model. There you go. And you don't have to make choices. You just put all three together. And the part that Cardano does, Cardano gets paid for. The part that your users do, they get paid for. You split up your blockchain rewards. Well, wait a minute. Can partner chains also get validators from other networks? Yeah. Minotaur eventually will turn on, and Ethereum validators, Solana validators, or validators in other ecosystems could also do that. And it's in partnership. So the token holders who launch as a CNA, the two token model, there's a token on Cardano that's the governance and oversight and the maintenance token, and the one is a utility token for paying for the computational units of the service. The token holders there can take a vote and they can decide, do we still want to be partnered with Cardano? Or do we want to move somewhere else? And if they want to move somewhere else, Minotaur lets you do that. It's very much like what Steve Jobs did when he was in the late 90s, early 2000s, realizing, hey, ActiveX and Flash and all this other stuff is really terrible for the web because you as a developer are basically vendor locking people into proprietary technology controlled by a single company. So what did he do? He embraced HTML5. And HTML5 became the lingua franca and it killed Flash in the web. So analogously, when you look at the current sidechains models, whether it be Cosmos with IBC or Parachains or any of these layer twos, they're basically totally reliant on an ecosystem and you're kind of stuck. You can't leave. With partner chains, what's so magical about this is you could say, hey guys, you're partnered with the ecosystem because you know what? We have the best infrastructure, the best community, the best way of launching decentralized, the best bridges, the best wallets, the best security, 24/7 uptime. And if that doesn't work for you in your community, go somewhere else and you can, and it doesn't destroy your ecosystem. What does that mean? It means that if you're Polygon and you're asking yourself about your future and say, if we can still, do what we do with Ethereum, but do it as a Cardano partner chain and we get a better deal as token holders, maybe we do that. It means if you're VeChain, maybe that makes sense. It means if you're Algorand, maybe that makes sense. It means if you're Hedera Hashgraph, maybe that makes sense. So what this does is actually opens up the opportunity for Cardano as an ecosystem to partner with other ecosystems. And remember what I was saying about the third generation cryptocurrency. What's number two? Interoperability. Why don't we have it? It's not technology. It's tokenomics at the core. It's tokenomics. People have financial incentives to do this. That's why they attack each other. But if they say, hang on, this thing exists and I benefit and they benefit, well, yeah, let's all be friends. That makes sense. Okay, there we go. So I think it's going to completely reset the entire conversation. And you start it with a utility that everybody needs. They need regulated value transfer protocols. They need computational privacy. Blockchains need the ability to keep a secret for modern business and real world assets and these types of things. And Midnight is going to come barreling down and get that done. But the minute that that's successful, people are going to say, wow, how do we replicate the Midnight miracle? And they'll say, wait a minute, I can become a partner chain too? Absolutely. Come on over. Cardano's open for business. And every time you do it, you bring millions of users into the ecosystem, you create billions of transactions, and it really benefits the ecosystem. And why would they want to come there? Because they have the best security and scalability, the best infrastructure, and the best governance. It's rock solid. It's going to be around 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And frankly, the friendliest community. So it's a huge bet. And there's a lot going on. It's an enormous project. It's kind of funny. There's so many different pieces. Like there's this huge governance initiative. Meanwhile, there's a massive partner chains initiative. Meanwhile, there's Midnight going on at the same time. And also Midnight has all the zero knowledge technology too, recursive snarks and all this other stuff. So all that magic moon math that the industry loves and praises, we're the cryptographers. We actually know how to do it better than most. It's a programming language problem and a cryptography problem. We have all those people. So it's leapfrogging the industry in terms of capabilities. And we're super excited about it. And it's just been great to partner with people. Like we went to the Polkadot ecosystem and the framework that Parity Chains is inspired by Parity Substrate. And that's just an amazing thing when, Gavin creates something and we're not exactly on the best of terms all the time. Some days we love each other, other days we don't. And, for the greater good of all ecosystems, it makes sense to blend and hybridize these things and call a spade when good design decisions were made. So that's super cool that blockchains can find ways to work together in that. And that's what creates the interoperability ecosystem. Now, to your final question, will it launch this year? Likely not. However, more to say about Midnight because it takes a little bit of time to turn on a capability like that. So we'll let the Midnight team speak for itself in that respect.
Charles, final question, because I know you got to go. You're a busy guy. You'll be speaking at Rare Evo, keynote speaker. We will be there this year speaking as well. Use code Altcoin Daily for 5% off. Everybody down in the audience. I want to pack the house with the Altcoin Daily community. Last year at Rare Evo, you said that you believe Cardano will become the biggest cryptocurrency in the world. That inevitably means it'll flip Bitcoin. When do you see that happening?
If we can do what I'm saying, there's no way to beat Cardano because there's nothing that can compete with it because at the end of the day, it has lived up to what Satoshi started. At the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to change the economic, political, and social systems of the world for everyone everywhere. Billions of people. So if you build a growth engine that doesn't lose its people and it's always adding people, and you build a growth engine where you can absorb all the technology of your competitors, at some point you just outgrow and then you wake up and it's a multi-trillion-dollar ecosystem with trillions of dollars of value moving around every single day. That's just a fact. It's a competitive reality and fact. And it's not done by any one individual's actions and behaviors. It's done by the collective whole's self-interest, just like a normal economy does. It's almost like GDP. Okay, so some people are in Argentina right now, and they're fighting like hell to get the Argentine government to adopt some things. Some people are in Ghana right now, fighting like hell to get the Ghanaian government to do things. There's some people in Vietnam getting Vietnamese game developers to do something. There's people wanting to be partner chains. And once midnight is out, and if it's successful, there'll be hundreds of partner chains coming, and people are building and launching. There are over 300 dApps that are at live and doing interesting things in Cardano. And every one of them has a team and a CEO and all kinds of people, and they're fighting like hell to get their stuff growing. The key is to enable and empower these people in the right way, that they have the resources and inspiration and tooling necessary to get to the next level. Then if you've designed it right, they come together as a community and they do the next step and then the next step. That is what flips Bitcoin, because Bitcoin stalled. The only value proposition it has is it's big and successful. That's it. It's not some new technology. It's not some new capability. It's not the fact that it's super easy to use it to go and do something interesting. It's big and successful. That's what Yahoo's value proposition was. That's what Microsoft Windows value proposition was. That's what Windows Phone's value proposition was. That's what MySpace's value proposition was. And, so network effects don't mean anything in technology, in economic, political, and social systems. It means absolutely nothing. If you don't believe me, go ahead and pull out your BlackBerry, open up Internet Explorer, go to, reset your MySpace account. So log into your Yahoo email or AOL email, and then reset your MySpace account and go ahead and blog about it, and create a little note there. Okay. So obviously none of these things are significant. But when I was growing up, they were the market standard and viewed as completely unassailable, and nobody could touch them. And they've been completely usurped by new things. And we think Google is unassailable. And look at the growth of Perplexity. Google's almost unusable now as a product. And all these AI search engines are a huge threat to them. And within just a few years, they could displace it if Google's not careful. I was at Eric Schmidt's house in 2022 at the Milken Institute, and he was rambling on and on about how large language models are like the next big thing. And he was absolutely right. He knew the future, yet he was completely convinced that Google was the one to win. He's like, we invented the transformer. We have all the talent. We have all the data. We have all the compute power. Look at the Google Tensor, all this type of stuff. We're going to be OpenAI. We're just going to be the guys. And what happened? They got outcompeted by startups and these types of things. So network effects change all the time. And the people that you'd expect to win, whether they be Ethereum or Bitcoin, here today, gone tomorrow. Solana was dead. Now, a huge amount of growth. Okay. Could be dead in 12 months, could grow another 5x, 10x. Those are flash in the pan unless you have the right fundamentals, though, because you have to look at a snapshot of 10 years. The only one that stayed relevant is Bitcoin. And there's a very particular reason for that, because it's a very simple model, but like gold, it can't grow above a certain floor. Digital gold only has a certain utility and purpose. And after, 500 million billion people own it, maybe you'll have a $250,000 Bitcoin or $500,000 Bitcoin, and that's it. And it'll kind of reach that cap there, and it's well distributed. Whereas high utility things that are smart contract systems, well, what's the value of being the voting system of every country on the planet? What's the value of being the payment system of the entire world? What's the value of being the credit system or the identity system for every country in the planet? It's incalculably higher than Bitcoin in that respect of being the value of gold. So what makes you that? The only way is embracing decentralization, first principles thinking, preserving the integrity of your system, and creating the right incentives for millions of people who don't know each other to come and use that technology in the right way, and also the ability to absorb new ideas. Why did BlackBerry fail, or Yahoo fail, or MySpace fail, or all these other things? Because they were inflexible to a changing competitive reality, and they didn't understand that their business model was no longer valid, and they were on momentum. They weren't actually driving anymore. And so Ethereum suffered from this. They got stuck in a mire, and now they have all these competitors eating away at them and slowly eating them out from the inside out, with layer twos grinding them down, which, by the way, can become layer ones at any time, especially with partner chains. And they don't have to be pro Ethereum. That network effect can move very quickly. Yet they're thinking they're like Bitcoin and they have this dominating thing. Yeah, they don't have that same cult. So they could get MySpace very quickly. So yeah, I do believe we could do this if we get the right things. This is why we're so focused on the fundamentals, like the first principles thinking, the Edinburgh Decentralization Index, the measure decentralization, the on-chain governance, these types of things, because you can't stop that once it's going fast enough, and it fixes its own problems. And if there's a mistake in your strategy, you're able to identify that faster than anybody else and absorb that. And if there's a brilliant idea, you're able to take that brilliant idea and bring it into your orbit, pivot, and make that a significant idea. No matter who you are, how brilliant you are, as a centralized business, you can't do that 24/7. The only ecosystems that can do that are ecosystems that elevate horizontally the users up to a point where each and every one of them has a say in visibility. Those are the systems that don't miss. They can't miss because you only need one smart cow to open the fence and then the whole herd gets out. So you just need one user to have a bright idea and it goes parabolic and everybody's like, yep, that's the model. Let's go do that. And then do you have a culture that allows you to pivot fast enough to go and chase that and get it done? That's what Cardano is building. That's the core USP of it. You asked me the opening question, why Cardano? Well, that's what it is. That's what we seek to do. And I have no idea, how that's going to translate to coin market cap or when that's going to translate. But directionally, it's right. It's like Don Valentine when he was talking about Sequoia, and they say, "How were you so successful?" He said, "I knew the future." He knew that these whole transistors and computer chip things were going to fucking change everything. But if you asked him, like, okay, well, when exactly is the personal computer and who is it going to bring the personal computer? Don couldn't have foretold Steve Jobs and IBM and all this other stuff in the 1960s and 70s. It was impossible. But he knew directionally this is the technology to bet on. This is the approach to bet on, because how the hell is the vacuum tube going to compete with that? You got one thing that's static and it can't get any smaller or more energy efficient. And you got the other thing doing this every 18 months. And the speed keeps going up every 18 months. You do the graph, you do the math. At some point, it's taking over the entire world. Gordon Morris said the exact same thing. So that's the thing about crypto. Are you losing your community? Are you getting more centralized or more decentralized? Can you absorb your competitors' technology? Do you have first principles thinking? And do you have the right governance system where you don't fracture apart? I'll close with this. When I was the CEO of Ethereum many years ago, before the earth cooled and was pushed out, as many authors like to remind people, the cryptocurrency project that scared me more than anything else was not Bitcoin or Litecoin or any of these. There wasn't a lot back then, but there were a few, was NXT. And the reason being is that I witnessed in just 3 months' time this thing come out of nowhere, built on Java with this incredibly engaged community, and they were adding features like crazy. They had user-driven assets. They had a DEX. They were going to add smart contracts through something called automated transactions. They were written in Java. They were already proof of stake. And I was like, well, the proof of stake doesn't work. They said, it doesn't fucking matter. We'll fix it. This community was running, and it was going so fast. What killed them was two things. One, their token distribution wasn't so good, but you can fix that. But the other thing, and this is the more pertinent thing, is they didn't have a good governance system, so they fractured. And they broke into things like Crypty and Lisk and eventually Scorix, which is Alex Cherpenoy's project, which became Ergo. Wave was another. They fractured in all these pieces, and they couldn't get it all together. Had they had the right governance system, Ethereum wouldn't exist. NXT would be number one, because they would have just grown and grown and grown like a weed, and they would have absorbed everybody. And it was a sexy project because it was new and interesting. It was first principles code base. It had Java. And I was like, who cares if it worked? They will find a way. This is what Brendan Nick likes to call the wrong way is the right way. When he creates JavaScript in 53 days, they had the right growth model behind it, and it became a thing. So when I looked at it, I said, look, Ethereum's going to take 24 months, and this was in 2014, to get to a point where it's hardened enough to do smart contracts. If NXT has smart contracts before us because they already have the community, the infrastructure, they're going to own the entire smart contract space, and they'll leapfrog everybody. And so governance matters that much. It is really the core differentiator between whether a project is successful or a project will fail. And in the long term, you can never get around the fact that poor governance will kill a project. Microsoft is another great example. In 1998, Bill Gates went to his research division, which at the time largest in the world for technology, and he said, tell me the future, the next 10 years. I want to know it. And here's what they told him. Bill, search, mobile computing, and social media. That's going to be it. And they wrote down the business model of Google, Facebook, and the iPhone. So a $600 billion company with a hyper monopoly that owned all technology, basically had on their desk a blueprint for the entire future, and they lost it. They watched Google rise. They watched Facebook rise. They watched, the iPhone come out of nothing. Why? Because their governance sucked. Their culture sucked. And Satya Nadella wrote about it and hit refresh when he became CEO. He said, the only thing I really did was change the culture, and the Microsoft did the rest because we had all the brains and all the market stuff. And they went from like a $300 billion company, $3 trillion company under Satya Nadella. And he changed culture. He said, the CEO, the C in there is culture. So that is the key. And so you want to talk about competitive differentiators and all these other things and go beyond it. You have to do that. That's really the core of who we are, what we do. And that's what we fight for in the Cardano ecosystem.
Charles, thank you so much for sharing your time. We will see you at Rare Evo. Thanks, man.